everybody. It's Dee with Father Andrew and Father Bob, and we're doing our second edition of Ask the Priest's Kids version. So we're gonna get rolling right off the bat and finish up some of the questions that we didn't get finished the last time. So from Maya in the 4th grade, she says, does everyone in the church believe in God?
I hope so. That's why they're there. I think that when people come to church, we presume that they come to give praise to the Lord and petition Him and give Him thanks for all the things He's given to us. And we have to focus on the Lord Himself. So He's there, and so I think that most people believe in the Lord there.
All right.
I would say I agree with Father Bob. I think probably most people who are in church are there to praise and worship God, but I think as well it can happen that our presence in church can often strengthen our belief in God. And therefore, anybody who might be doubting Him, I think it's a good idea to come to church. I'll just give you a little story about myself. When I was in college, I was thinking a little bit about God's real presence in the Eucharist, in the host, and it just so happened, for one reason or another, I think I was going through a hard time, that I was doubting, not seriously, but I was thinking, wow, it's a really hard thing for me to believe that little piece of bread is Jesus. And I was there in Mass once, and when the priest was holding up the Eucharist right after consecration, I felt very convinced that that was the true body and blood of Christ. So even though you might be having doubts, or you might say, is this something that I'm strongly believing now? I would still say come to church, because in my opinion, great miracles happen in church.
And I think also the support of the people who really are around you, who care for the Lord, are really a support for each of us too. Their faith can really rub off on ours.
It's true. I remember one time I was in Mass and they were canting all of the saints and calling me. I actually got chills because all the spirits were coming, all the feelings. All right, Julia from the 3rd grade asks, do you know all the readings?
That's why we have the book.
If you mean by memory, no, we don't know all the readings. Many of the Bible, come from the Bible, and if you read the Bible, pray the Bible, if your mom or dad maybe will teach you or read to you a Bible story before bed, then of course when we come to Mass, it's much more familiar, and we say, oh, I know that. But it's amazing because I think every time we're really trying to pay attention, every time we read the same Bible story over, I find we always can pick up something new. So it doesn't hurt to read them over and over.
Ariana from the 6th grade says, why do some people receive the Eucharist in their hand and others receive it directly in their mouth?
So the church allows every person to choose which option. Years ago, ago, the only option the church allowed was receiving it on the tongue. The reason being is that I think out of respect, that we know that Jesus is there, that that's him, and to worship and venerate his presence in the Eucharist was like, well, I'm not worthy that my hand should touch him. Since Vatican II, that has changed. So the church allows us to receive him on our hands. We can do that if we wish. And so it's up to you, whatever way that you want to do that. The priest respects. So at least up until now, recently we had some people thinking about this question because of the coronavirus. Is one more sanitary than the other? It's my belief as a priest that both, when done properly, are probably equally sanitary. So it's really up to you to decide.
And I think it's both of them can be very reverent if the person really understands what they're doing. To receive Christ in your hands, as they say, you make a throne for him, and when Christ comes and receives, it is placed in your hands. That throne that you're making for him is a symbol of your respect and love. And when you receive him, you are choosing to do that yourself, and nobody else is choosing to do that for you. And also on the tongue, it can be very reverent, but people have to make that choice. People have to be aware of what they're doing, and I think that's the difference of to be aware of the preciousness of this gift that we're receiving, the body and blood of Christ. And when we offer our hands or we offer our tongue, that can be the most important thing that we can do all that day.
Very good. Josie and Natalie Castro say good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, Josie and Natalie.
Cameron from the 6th grade says, what is the most rewarding thing about being a priest?
To me, one of the most rewarding things, because there's so many, is to be of service to people. All my life I've wanted to serve people. Always have been jobs of service. And I really choose to serve the people. And the priesthood has given me an overwhelming opportunity to do that. And I think that's what my vocation is, to serve.
Good.
I think that's also probably my answer. Sometimes it's easy to serve people. Sometimes we like serving. Other times it's a chore. And so maybe in those times in which serving people is a chore, it doesn't seem like the most interesting thing or the most rewarding thing, but even I think in those times when we find it hard to get motivated, the fact that, if we put a little bit of our effort into it, God rewards us and makes it flourish and be abundant. And so then that makes it all the more interesting, because you see miracles happen when we put a little bit of effort into serving others.
Very good. Okay, so now, what is your favorite church tradition?
Mine are having to do with the seasons and the celebrations that we have in the seasons. Like starting tomorrow, May is a month of Mary. And I remember when I was little kid, the processions. I always loved being in processions, and because I was the shortest one in the class, I was always the first one in the processions. So Father Rogeman, who was the pastor at St. Joe's at that time, he was very strict with processions, and he wanted it just so. And to do it the way he wanted was really beautiful, I thought. And to have the songs that children sang to the Blessed Mother were really beautiful. And the crowning, the May crownings, and all the things that we did for Our Lady during May were really very, very much a joy for me. And also in December when we had the celebrations of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I remember a long time ago, before I was in seminary, they had a Marian celebration for the whole diocese, and they had it at Marmion, the football field. And everybody in each of the parishes brought their statues, their images of Our Lady, and we worked one up, and we were carrying the statue on a beer and a little umbrella and everything. We were so proud of being a part of that Marian celebration, and I kind of miss those things.
I don't know, for me, I'm still trying to think of an answer. Maybe a tradition that I've come to appreciate just recently within a few years is punchkis. I never heard of them before I came to Elgin. But there are many different traditions. It's hard to come up with one right now where I might consider it my favorite.
All right. Alex from the 4th grade is asking, is the church open every day?
This particular church is open every day because every day we do have a mass. It doesn't mean that it's open 24 hours. In fact, because it's directly connected to our school, it has to, for safety reasons, be locked. But I think the churches, as much as they should be open. And that's what makes it so hard during this time of coronavirus, when maybe churches that were traditionally open are closed and locked. I would invite all the kids who are watching, all the adults too, today, let's say a special prayer that our churches can be open and open soon, because it is very important for us to be able to just pop in and say hi to God who is here in the tabernacle, and he makes himself available to us. And so it's something that I've been considering now that, if our school is no longer functioning on this campus, what does that mean? What should our church be more available? So it's something that I'm considering, and it's a good question.
All right. Next we have Delaney from the 7th grade asks, what would happen if someone came to reconciliation and confessed to committing a felony such as murder? How would you answer if the police questioned you about it?
Very carefully. It's a good question, because I think Delaney probably asked this question knowing that we priests have a duty not to reveal in confession what was said there. Even in such a very serious circumstance as somebody admitting to doing a murder. There's very good reason why the church has this rule. It's so that anybody who feels the need to confess before God can find a representative that will honor the secrecy, not because the priest or the church wants to become complicit in any grave offense, but rather so that somebody can find counsel and hopefully be convinced to do the right thing. So as a priest, I would try to help this person do the right thing, meaning I would say, look, if you're coming here to confession, it's because your conscience is bothering you. You know that what you did was wrong. And therefore, the best way for us to fix something that we've done wrong is to confront it, to recognize it, to admit the truth about it, and try to make it right. So in the confessional, I would encourage the person to take responsibility for what they've done. Part of asking for forgiveness is asking forgiveness for any victim that might have suffered because of our actions. So not only that, but it would actually help them heal themselves. And therefore, if I was questioned by the police, I'm afraid I would have to be faithful to the promise that I make as a priest before God and before the people of His church, which is I cannot repeat anything that I hear in the confessional.
I had that happen to me once when I was in my first parish. I was called to a court case, and before the court case was ready to start, the person came to confession. They were being accused of murder, and so it was something that he had on his conscience. Whether it was or not, I didn't know, but I could not reveal that to anybody, what he said to me in confession. But I think it was a very powerful thing for that person to really believe that God does forgive. Whether it was true or not, God does forgive. And when people know that, and when people trust that the priest cannot say anything of what's going on there, there's a confidence and there's a trust and there's a freedom to share, which is really powerful.
So what do you say to an attorney or a judge or something? What are the words that you would say to them?
I'm sorry, I can't divulge anything in the sacrament of reconciliation.
Okay.
And anybody who is an attorney knows full well,
Right.
because there are attorney privileges, and so they themselves are maybe not bound morally, but ethically, and also enjoy the
Attorney-client privilege.
attorney-client privilege, so they would know full well what we're talking about.
Ilse asks from the 5th grade, and we kind of covered this already, is it bad to take the Holy Eucharist in your hand? And you kind of said it, but just answer her question.
No, it's not bad. As you mentioned, we already talked about it. I would add, though, that, we talked about respect, and we agree that both can be done respectfully. It depends on, our awareness and our intention, our reverence. But I would say if you do take it in your hands, it's not really respectful to do it when you have dirty hands or when you might have all types of messages written in ink in your hands. That wouldn't be very respectful. So, just thought I'd throw that in.
The answers to the questions on the test.
And if you want to take it by hand, you should consume it right away.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
either way, it's important to consume the Eucharist in front of the priest or the Eucharistic minister who's giving it to you. It's meant to be consumed right away. So, yeah.
Okay. Bella from the 4th grade is asking, do you ever get nervous when you're in front of people?
The short answer is yes. It's an overwhelming thing if you want to share a message and you really want, you're excited about the message, and sometimes people are just looking at you, waiting for something happy or good to happen, and you're saying, wow, this is overwhelming. It's scary sometimes. But if you really believe that there's something that you want to share, and it's important for you to share, that kind of overcomes a little bit.
I agree. I don't think we have to say anything more. Yeah.
I remember I asked you if you were nervous before the first time we live streamed Mass, and you were with that.
Yes, I was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So next we have from, I think it's from Ariana. It says, how are our beliefs different from those of Lutherans?
Well, I believe.
And I grew up Lutheran.
Yeah, yeah. So, that's precisely why I'm not going to get into specifics, because I don't know that I could say all specifics, but what I would say is the following, that I think between the Christian faiths, probably at least 75% of what they believe is pretty much the same. There are certain differences, and that's why there are different churches, because they are different. So I'm not going to say it's all the same, it doesn't matter. No, I think each person is the faith that they're in because either they were born into it or raised into it, or because they find it more fulfilling or appropriate or whatever reason. But to get back to what I was saying, I think 75% is pretty much the same. One thing that I would say that is maybe different to a certain degree is the fact of the sacraments. In the Catholic Church, we have 7 sacraments. I think in the other Christian churches, there's probably, I think the Lutherans probably, I know they have baptism, I know they have reconciliation. They do have, yes, they do.
Well, it's Mass.
They do have
It's
reconciliation. I know this because I went to a Lutheran seminary, and there they had, some of them do, some of them don't, okay? So this is why it's a complicated answer. They have communion, however, their communion is slightly different than our communion. What communion is, and there too I would say it varies between the different branches of the Lutheran. So it's a very, very complicated answer that we probably don't need to get into here, but I would say, the Lutherans believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, the Savior of the world. So do we as Catholics. So again, I think the majority of the elements of the two faiths are pretty similar.
And Martin Luther was a Catholic
Was a
priest.
Catholic priest, yes, he
Right.
was.
And he died a Catholic.
Oh, he did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But also, one of the things that it's very, very different is that Holy Communion, the Eucharist, has to be confected by a priest. And other churches don't have the priesthood of Jesus Christ like the Catholic Church has. Many churches, including many branches of the Lutheran Church, have a memorial service. Do this in memory of me, and think it's a remembrance of what happened. But we believe that it is the true presence of Jesus Christ at that time. That's a very important difference.
And I know that you guys, in most cases, in most Lutheran churches, the one that I grew up in, we just did mass confession. So the confession of faith when we start mass here, that's all we ever did.
Yeah.
So that's the one. And there's women.
But there are groups that do the individual.
I'm sure there are. Probably up in the Wisconsin Synod, there were some very strict people, and then there were some not so strict people. So anyway, all right, let's move on. Grayson from the 6th grade is asking, do you have a favorite saint, and why is he or she your favorite? And you're sitting right there in front of St. Lawrence.
Well, for me it'd be hard to pick between, I have a few favorite saints, and again, I really didn't think about it. I mean, one that comes immediately to my mind is St. Thomas More. Why? Because he was very committed to the truth, even though he knew that it would get him in trouble. I think I find value in his example because in many ways I feel the same commitment to truth, and sometimes it seems to have gotten me in trouble. If you look at it in a very human way, but you know, there are many great saints, and other saints are known for their courage. Other saints are known because they're very generous. So I think it's hard to find one saint that is the ultimate saint in everything. That would be Jesus, of course. But I have a few favorites.
Father Bob is looking up his favorite saint because he's got it in his
I
massive
have
wallet there.
Yes, I have a little card in here, but I can't find it. The female saint that I admire so very much is Saint Teresa of Calcutta. We talk about service. She was an image of service, bringing Christ to the poorest of the poor, the most needy of the poor. And I think that was overwhelming for me to. At one time, I went with a priest friend to the Eucharistic Congress in Philadelphia, and we were always late because the pastor there was always late. And we got there in time just after Mother Teresa had given her talk, and Dom Elder Camara was going to have a talk, and they met right in front of me, and I saw Mother Teresa. She was about an arm's length and a half from me, and to see these two saints in front of me was really overwhelming for me. To know what she has been doing, to know what she was committed to, it was a wonderful, wonderful moment for me. Wow. And then there's a little young priest. Young man. You should know his name. I think he's from Mexico.
Jose Sanchez
Jose
del Rio.
Sanchez del Rio. He was 15 or 16, and he decided to serve the church. And when the church was being oppressed, and the priests were being killed, and the people who were Catholic were being killed and assassinated, he chose to give his life for the church. And the last words he said were, "Viva Cristo Rey," long live Christ the King. He went through horrible, horrible pains and suffering, but he never forgot his faith.
Did Did you already answer?
I already answered, but I would say the interesting thing of Father Bob's favorite saints is both are of our lifetime. So
Oh,
that's important to be aware of, you know, because a lot of times we think of saints, we think, oh, people who lived centuries ago. No, there are saints of today, and we've been most fortunate to live in the presence of many of them.
so the 8th grade came up with a whole question here. If you could spend the day with one female saint and one male saint, who would they be and why? What would you be interested in learning from them, and what questions would you ask them? Why would these be the saints you would choose? So I know Father Bob kind of got to spend a little bit of time with St. Teresa, but is there somebody else from like forever ago maybe that became saints that you would want to guide you?
Another Saint Teresa, Saint Teresa of Lisieux, the little flower. She never went out of her cloister, but she was the patroness of the missions, because she prayed for the missions. And her little way that she wrote was a very powerful thing, aid to people who want to follow the Lord. And she was joyful. She was really joyful. A young person, happy in her life, suffered, yes. But she was always so close to the Lord. And to be able to ask her, you know, some questions that I want to know about her and her relationship with Jesus Christ would be wonderful. And male saint, I think Peter. Peter was overwhelming. He was impetuous. He spoke before he thought. He loved the Lord deeply, but he denied him 3 times. He didn't know what to do sometimes. After Jesus ascended into heaven, what was he going to do? So he went back to fishing, you know, just something that he knew about. And then Jesus comes and saves the day again. But it's Peter, this person who was a sinful man, a man who worked hard, a man who just wanted to be the best, but failed a lot of times, became the capstone of the church. Amazing, really amazing.
Well, listening to Father Bob made me start thinking, who would I choose? So I don't know that I have names nailed down, but I would say the following. For the man, I would think I would want to ask somebody who is a priest, because I'm a priest, to get the most out of learning from them, I think. And I would probably choose Francis, St. Francis. For the
Is there more than one St. Francis, or is it St. Francis
of Assisi,
Okay.
of Assisi, yeah. And give me a second, I'll explain why him. For the woman, Saint, I don't know, I'd add another Teresa, St. Teresa of Avila. She was responsible for reforming the Carmelite order. She was a nun. So if you ask me why I chose those two, I think because both were called to serve God in a very, very special time in which the church needed to be renewed. And I believe that we're definitely in one of those times now. And I think there's a lot that we could learn from both of them. me as a priest, asking things of Francis because he received a locution from God saying, rebuild my church. And I'm sure he has many things that he could teach all of us priests, or all Catholics as a matter of fact, on how to rebuild the church. And the same way with Saint Teresa of Avila, who, but then again, you think of Saint Teresa of Calcutta, she did the same thing. She started a new order. She was in an order. So there are many valuable lessons from many saints. It's hard to choose who I would choose, but those come to mind.
Haley from the 3rd grade asks, where do you keep the gifts before Mass? Why do you keep the body and blood in the tabernacle during Mass?
By the gifts, if she means the water and wine and the hosts, when they bring them up in procession, those are the gifts that the people, the community, offers to the Lord. Together with their hearts and their prayers, all of these things are offered to the Lord at that time at Mass, and also including the gifts of money and financial things too. All of these things we offer to the Lord. And then after the consecration, when we place the consecrated host back into the tabernacle, it is placed there not so that we can just adore it, but those hosts that are there so that we can take them to the people who cannot come to celebrate with us. The shut-ins, the people who are in hospitals, the people who can't really celebrate with us, so that they know that they're still a part of the community. They are part of our family.
So just to add and clarify on Father Bob's answer, what he said is true. The tabernacle is a dignified, safe place to keep what we consider to be very, 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 very precious, the most precious thing, which is God himself. And so it's fitting that he be in a central, dignified place, not in a closet, or in some, obscure place in the church. But the part I wanted to add to clarify that Father Bob didn't address is, in the question you said the wine or the
Body and blood.
Blood of Christ. The blood of Christ is not kept in the tabernacle, so we don't keep the precious blood in the tabernacle, just the body of Christ.
And before you consecrate them during Mass, they're just wine and...
Just wine and bread.
And bread.
Yeah.
Right. Okie dokie. Christian B. from 4th grade asks, how many years did it take you to be a priest? So I guess...
I think we touched on that on the past question and answer session. I would just briefly say here, it took me 10 years studying as a seminarian before I was ordained a priest.
About the same with me, 9 years, and then I continued some studies in different places too. As a priest, you have the opportunity to continue your education throughout the years. To me, the only thing I really knew came out of seminary was how much I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a good thing, but you knew where to find it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the best thing, is to learn how to get your answers. Veronica from the 4th grade asks, why do altar servers need to have First Communion to be able to serve?
To be an altar server requires a certain maturity, so it's not necessary technically that they receive First Holy Communion. In fact, an adult could be an altar server even though they didn't receive their First Holy Communion. But in order to serve the Mass well as an acolyte, as an altar server, I think it's important to have a certain maturity, knowing that you have a key role, an important role of helping the community stay focused on this very beautiful sacrament. Therefore, you know, we require a certain age for somebody. I will be truthful. Some kids might be ready before others, and some might even be younger than you know, that particular age, and be perfectly mature enough to serve the Mass. So it's a really judgment call on the priest who allows the person to offer themselves as a server. And here at St. Lawrence, we're in great need of altar servers. So we appreciate all of you who make a lot of times a very special effort to come here in Mass and serve. You know, I hope that tradition continues, even though you know, kids might not be coming here physically to this school to do it, but we still am very excited, I think, to have young people. I have many fond memories of being an altar server when I was young, and my biggest trainer was my mom, okay? My mom, in the sense, she didn't train me, but she made darn sure that I was there when I was scheduled to be there. And that gave me a lot of good formation as a young person. Thank you, Mom.
I'm learning about being an altar server these days.
Same with me. I served from second grade till I was 20. And the different priests that I served with, it was an honor to be there at the altar with them. They all were different, and all gave me an understanding of what was going on at the Mass that was opening, mind expanding, I guess you'd call it. And it was good that I was honored to do that. To me, to be a server was a real honor, was a real blessing that I had.
So you just mentioned that you were an altar server till you were 20 years old. And I've noticed that most of our altar servers are, like, they kind of quit when they become seniors in high school. Is that just something so that we can let younger folks in, or?
Well, to me, it's that a lot of people don't think it's cool to be a server.
Oh.
And so they quit right after 8th grade, I think, a lot of them. But I think to me it's a real honor to be at the altar that way.
I would just say, you know, in the parishes where I grew up in and served, most people quit after they finished 8th grade. And I have to say, here at St. Lawrence, seeing people go on through high school, for me, was very, very edifying. I think the world of you guys that kept on till high school. So I think it's a great testimony, a great witness.
I think I know a couple of the kids that went like through high school, and then they left when they were going off to college.
Right.
All right, Julia from the 3rd grade asks, how many times do you celebrate Mass a week?
So I have to think about this. I have to think about it because there are some days that I celebrate more than once. For example, Sundays I usually have 2 masses. But all the other days I have 1 mass a day. As a priest, we're encouraged to celebrate Mass every day because it's the greatest prayer that we can offer to God. You know, if you're a priest and you work in a very big parish, and if sometimes you might not have an assistant priest with you, it becomes very difficult. Some days you might have to celebrate 3, or I've known some even 4 or 5. The church doesn't want us to celebrate that many times a day because, you know, it's hard, you know, not to get tired when you're celebrating that many masses a day. So the church generally recommends that a priest celebrate once a day.
Sundays being the exception, probably.
Yes.
Like Father said, it depends on the parish you're in and the situations there. I've been in a situation where every day I had 2 masses during the week, and on Sundays, if I couldn't find anybody to help, I was 3 or 4. It's to serve the people, and I agree with Father when he says it's tiring, but especially if you put yourself totally into what you're doing, it's exhausting, but it's beautiful. And so I think that, you know, when you're in a parish that is a big parish, it can be a challenge, but it also can be beautiful.
All right, we've got a couple more regular questions, and then I've got some rapid fire ones. All right, Lila from the 3rd grade asks, and we kind of covered this already, did it take a lot of training and work for you to become a priest?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's like 8 hours a day school, or like regular college? Is that basically?
I think seminary is not just college. When I went to seminary college, it wasn't just a college. Seminary college was a place where you really were discerning if that vocation was yours, and the whole environment that you were living in was an education and a challenge too, to really understand if this is my vocation, how can I live it? If I have examples of the priests and the other seminarians there, and all these things were continuing education. If you say 24 hours a day, I would say yeah, in a way, yes. And theology too. And afterward too, I had some classes in different places, and all of these things, all the people that were there in these programs were in education. And it wasn't just the classroom work. It was living it and saying yes to that vocation throughout the day.
I think Father Bob's answer is wonderful, because it shows that when a young man is studying to be a priest, what is he studying to be or become? Another Christ. You have to realize that we're trying to imitate Christ. People expect the priest to be as if he were another Christ, meaning somebody that was helpful to the people just as Christ was. So what does that mean? Well, when you look at Christ, Christ was perfect. Obviously, no human being can become perfect as Jesus was, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. So that involves a lot of different things we need to do or study. First of all, it means we have to work on just purely human virtues. Jesus was kind, he was understanding, he was forgiving, he was punctual, he was whatever, all these human virtues. So the people expect us to be all those things too. Also, when you look at Jesus, Jesus was intelligent. he had great answers to very hard questions. So that means that we have to develop our mind, and our intelligence to be able to answer some very challenging questions. Jesus was also spiritual. So what does that mean? We have to be spiritual like Jesus was. In other words, how do we become spiritual? By being in tune with God. And how do we do that? Through prayer. So that means we have to study the prayer life and practice the prayer life. So being a priest involves many, many different levels, and that's why it takes so long. But you know, I think if a young person saw all those challenges in front of them, and they might have, you know, second thoughts. Well, that seems like, and yeah, you can think that, but at the same time, when God calls a person to follow that call, he goes directly at their heart, and it's kind of like a love affair with God. And when we're in love, we do crazy things, we do hard things, we do things that really are impossible for us. So that's why the most important thing is trying to discern the call, as Father Bob was saying. If we feel that call and we know it's there, then it doesn't really matter how challenging or difficult something is. We'll be able to do it.
But also remembering that we're human beings, and that we are frail, and we will fail, but it doesn't mean that we can't continue to grow in understanding Christ and our relationship.
Very good. All right. The third grade class asks, why does the weekday mass have some missing parts?
Well, I will throw that right back at you, third graders. Can you tell me what parts are missing during the weekday mass? If by missing you mean the things that we do on Sunday that we don't do on the weekday, can you name them? I'm listening. We're waiting for answers. Somebody want to write in so Dee can tell us what your answers are?
So while we're waiting for them to type, we've got some other questions. Who's the better cook?
Father Andrew.
And what's your favorite food?
Father Andrews.
So what kind of cuisine do you like the best?
I like them all. I like Chinese, I like Italian, I like Mexican, I like all kinds of things.
I'm pretty much the same way. I like mixing it up. So I don't like the same thing over and over again, maybe except for certain things like good coffee or something. But no, I like mixing it up, and I don't know, there's things that maybe I think of, oh, I haven't had this in a long time, and oh, let's make it, you know, so.
All right. Favorite place that you've traveled? And it doesn't have to be for church.
Oh, that's hard to answer. For me, probably Italy. Why? Because there is a large church portion of that. You see so much history of the church and different churches and artwork. Of course, Italian food, which is probably my favorite. Then you also have the countryside, especially in southern Italy, the beautiful weather. I hate to say this because I grew up in a very Italian town, Rockford, and
It's pretty tough.
yeah, I never thought that I would admit that Italy was that I'm an Italian at heart, but it kind of won me over when I had the opportunity to go there.
I think it's a double question. For recreation, for vacations and things, I think Spain was the most beautiful for me. not only because of the culture and the food and all of that, but it was going back to trying to find my roots, my history too, a combination of that. And that was really profound for me. But to edify me, I guess, going to the monastery up in New Mallory, I think this is the most beautiful, quiet, simple place to be.
Where is that? What?
Peosta, Iowa, just
Okay.
west of Dubuque.
I have to add, because Father Bob piqued my imagination with regard to finding ones. My dream is to go to Sweden. I want to go to Sweden, so if anybody wants to go on a pilgrimage to Sweden, we can arrange that.
Father doesn't like it, Irish stuff, and his name is Irish. He says he doesn't like Irish stuff.
All right. Okay, coffee or tea?
It's not true.
Tea.
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 Coffee,
Cubs or Sox?
Neither.
neither.
Pepsi or Coke?
Pepsi for me.
Coke.
Okay, so we have a divided household. All right, well, we don't have anybody typing any answers here for the parts of the Mass,
Oh,
so
okay. So what's the answer?
I don't know. You
Well, one is probably most commonly the Gloria, glory to God in the highest, so that's not in there. Another one is probably the Creed,
gotta- yeah.
which is not in there. Another part that we don't, well, no, we do it on weekday masses, the intentions, prayer intentions, we do that.
The homilies are normally a tad shorter.
Yes, they're normally shorter.
Sometimes a lot shorter.
Sometimes a lot shorter, yeah.
And we miss the second reading,
Oh, that's true, yes, right.
so that, I think those are the biggest parts.
Those are the biggest parts that are missing, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time this afternoon, and we had quite a few people listening. Nobody typed in any extra questions today. Rose Plazik says, Father Andrew, Father Bob, looking good.
Thank you, Rose.
Stay healthy.
So we'll see everybody again sometime soon. If you've got questions that you would like to ask the fathers, then just send them to us via web updates at St. Lawrence Church, StLawrenceElgin.org. It's right there on the sign, and we'll get those questions answered for you. So have a great rest of your day, everybody.
God bless you.
Bye.
Bye.